said to you, I think, without people like you, they wouldn't exist.
That's an interesting thing. Well,
So they depend on you, that's what I think.
yeah, that's interesting. Many people think so. It's very complicated.
Take the word antivirus.
Yeah, and we make the viruses, of course, without us. Yeah. Well, without us, there would still be the criminals, of course. But the criminals might not find such techniques. Well, it depends. I think also criminals could find new techniques, new things to make viruses better. But I think it could work without us. But it's more interesting with us. We make their life harder. They have something to do. We make work. Of course, great.
Another thing, you mentioned hoaxes.
Yes?
Okay, you say you do viruses and you don't want to harm anybody, but to prove that the hoaxes work, you need to send them out on the internet. It does not really harm people, maybe, but it does piss off a lot of them.
Yes.
What do you have to say against this?
What you have to start?
To say it does not really harm people, but pissing people off does harm them, I guess.
Well, hoaxes is very interesting. Actually, what I said, you could send them out. It does not harm the system really. So it would be okay. If there's no data manipulation, I think it would also be legal. It could be legal in some way. But we normally don't spread binary formats, and well, to be honest, most reactors just don't code hoaxes. Hoaxes are more coded by some pupil or student who just want to scare his neighbor a bit. So I haven't seen a hoax in the virus scene well, I have never seen a hoax in the virus scene actually in the last years from the important groups. Of course, there were hoaxes, but the important groups and their electronical science hadn't any hoax.
So how do you prove your social engineering skills if you don't distribute to the hoaxes?
Ah, okay, I see. Well, for example, I wrote a virus, or better call it a worm, that had different emails in its code with different subjects and texts. And I mean, people saw, hey, if this virus would execute, it would send this email. So people saw, hey, I have a social engineering skills. My emails are really look trustful, but I don't have to send it to prove it. You know what I mean?
Not really.
If you look into the source code, you can see what the virus would do, but you don't have to really do it.
Yeah, but technically, if you code a virus, you can say, okay, you take advantage of a fault in a system, and you can prove, okay, I made this virus, it works. It's just in theory, you can say, okay, it will work. In social engineering, you can say, okay, I wrote this pseudo hoax or whatever. There's no way to say it will work or not.
Well, yes, you would have to spread it to really prove it, but we won't do it. But you're right, to really prove that it works, you would have to spread it and test it in live examples. But normally it should be enough to just say it could work, you know I wrote a hoax and it could work, but I won't spread it. I hope it answers your questions a bit.
Yeah. And yeah, one last question before I go. Have you already distributed a binary virus before?
What?
Have you already distributed binary virus before when you were...
If I distributed binary virus?
Yeah.
Never.
Okay.
Okay. Hi. Oh, hang on, please.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that there's an increasing number of Linux viruses. Can you go a bit into detail into that?
Details about Linux viruses?
Yes.
Well, it's like with Windows. Windows is very popular, so there are many viruses for Windows, of course. But Linux gets more and more popular, and there are many viruses coming for Linux. I give you an example. I talked about scripting languages. Scripting languages are very interesting for viruses because they run by an interpreter. So there was a nice example, there was a nice example by Sinch Flash, who coded a PHP virus that ran on a web server and infected all the PHP files. And if now a user surfed this web server, he got infected. This is an example for a new way to code a virus for a Linux platform. And so more and more people try to target also web servers, and they are mostly running Unix and Linux. So it's increasing, and because of the new Windows Vista, more people switch to Mac OS X. I heard a statistic that 50 to 60% think about switching to Mac OS X because of Vista, and you have a Unix base in Mac OS X. So writing viruses for Mac OS X would be like writing viruses for Unix-based systems. So the more people use Linux and Unix, and it will come that more people use it, the more viruses you have. At the moment you have maybe 100 viruses for Mac OS X, a few thousand for Linux, and 100,000 for Windows. But it gets more for Unix and Linux platforms, because more and more people switch to those platforms.
I have a question.
Well, where's the micro?
Okay, I have a quick question. If there's only 50 of you really in the scene, here I am on, I don't work for an antivirus company. Let's say I did work for an antivirus company. What would it take for me to buy you all out? Because all I do is there's 50 of you, right? And I just pay you all to be my research staff. And that's the end of the problem right there. And I have a stranglehold in the market. And you can worship me as your commercial god! Sorry. But, it's actually quite a valid question, because what is to stop you guys setting up your own going into commercial business and setting up your own research shop and actually selling on, if you like, the results of your research and keeping it, if you like, within a closed loop, so that so the techniques that you come up with and don't actually leak out to the criminal world. I mean, I'm a little surprised if the numbers are so low that there is no discussion, or that you have not actually seriously discussed or considered this. Oh yeah, well, that's a very good point, actually. So maybe I should go into sort of like the Russian mafia porn business or something. I'm obviously not thinking big enough. Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, just first a comment and a question. Okay, I don't think the world is white and black and white, like you said. Okay, it's 95% of good guy, 5% of bad guy. Maybe you have to include, I don't know in which side, information warfare government branch. We are using as well virus and so on. And maybe to take into account that some of the people have the skill and the money. Maybe you have skill and money. But some of the other people have a skill and no money, like in some emerging countries. I don't want to mention because no need. And some of the people have the money and can buy that skill. So when you need to, to eat, maybe you have no choice to say, okay, I have a moral and I want to develop a virus for the bad things. Maybe you just have to get the money and you will develop the virus. There is an asymmetry of the knowledge in the society. And some of the people of the emerging country are just doing that for survive, So it's not as simple as just summarize to good guy and bad guy, But anyway, it was a comment. And my question is, do you think for the 2008, you will an increase of virus to Macintosh? And this virus will be compatible to iPhone, maybe? Thank you.
So your question is if Macintosh viruses will increase?
Yeah, and compatible to iPhone, those viruses will be maybe compatible to iPhone?
Oh, very interesting question. Well, actually, I think yes, because as I said, I guess in future mobile device viruses will get more interesting, and the iPhone is a very interesting target for virus writers, because there have been found in the last months several vulnerabilities in Safari browser. They helped to execute shellcode on the system, and I bet it will just be a matter of time until people code viruses that exactly execute code on the iPhone. And of course, as I said, if 50 to 60% think of switching to Mac, just only if 10% would really do it, this would be an enormous increase in Mac users. So with increasing Mac users, viruses will increase as well. It's just like natural behavior.
Hi.
Hi.
You mentioned that metamorphic and polymorphic viruses were very interesting, very exciting. Do the VXers use a lot of cryptography to randomly shuffle instructions and repack the code and that sort of thing?
Do they use what?
Cryptography.
Oh.
Implemented correctly with the good
Let me think a
random
moment.
number generation and...
Yes. Many VXers use cryptography nowadays. And maybe as a good example, I could give you here now, ransomware would be a good example. There was a great code by a wargame from Italy. I mentioned him before. He is the leader of the Doom Riders team from America. And he coded a great ransomware that crypted all the files on the hard drive, sends an email to the person who got infected, and says, if you want your files back, pay money. He never executed it. He just showed it would be possible. And there are many viruses nowadays in scripting language as well as normal language that use simple cryptography, just like XORing or very advanced things. So yes, VXers use it. Any more? There are still questions.
You use some exploits and other leaks of OSs. Did you ever consider contacting the vendor before you contact the antivirus company, like Microsoft or the OpenOffice org?
You mean if I should contact the vendor instead of...
Contact the vendor first and then let the antivirus know.
In the example of the Bad Bunny virus, it was very interesting. We first contacted the AV company, who then informed the vendor itself, but the reaction from the OpenOffice team was quite, not surprising, very disappointing. They just said, well, it's not a real worm, it does not work, and if you're stupid enough to click on a macro, it's your fault, and they really talked about it like it wouldn't be a problem. So we normally don't contact the vendors because they don't believe it would work. So we contacted the AV, and they have the power to make a story out of it.
My question is about what happened if somebody gets your code, make a binary, and attacks, and the BND is searching for you because the code is of you. What happened?
Whoa.
It's illegal in Germany, I think.
Well, it's still not illegal in Germany to code viruses. They wanted to make a law to really make virus coding illegal, but they haven't made it. So I might get asked maybe if I had something to do with it, but normally they couldn't make any problem to me.
Okay.
It's still legal, really. Any more? Comments, questions?